When the full-scale invasion launched back in February 2022, few believed Ukraine could withstand the sheer weight of the Russian war machine. The original plan was simple: a lightning-fast 3-day blitzkrieg striking simultaneously from the north, east, and south to overwhelm defensive positions. But the battle for Kiev proved to be the first major turning point, exposing severe flaws in heavy armor logistics and overstretched columns. On paper, the mathematical disparity was staggering. Russia outspent Ukraine nearly 10-1 in defense, boasting vast reserves of manpower and armor. Yet by the autumn of 2022, sweeping counteroffensives in Kharkiv and Kherson proved that tactical agility could turn the tide against brute force. Fast forward through 2023 and 2024, and the conflict shifted entirely from high-speed maneuvers into a brutal, static war of attrition. Today, a continuous 1,000-kilometer front line stretches across eastern and southern Ukraine, defining the modern industrial battlefield. For a long time, Russia relied heavily on its immense Soviet-era reserves, firing tens of thousands of artillery shells every single day. But deep storage satellite analysis reveals a striking trend. Open-air tank and artillery storage bases across Siberia are being gradually drained. Heavy armor is no longer the undisputed king of the battlefield, as cheap first-person view drones have fundamentally altered land warfare dynamics. In response, Ukraine built one of the most sophisticated, decentralized electronic warfare grids in the world to neutralize incoming threats. Meanwhile, Russia fully pivoted to a total war economy, throwing vast state reserves into defense manufacturing to sustain its offensive operations. Yet, every attempt to break through heavily fortified Ukrainian strongholds in Donbass has come at an exceptionally steep price. When you look at the monthly data, the ratio of personnel losses relative to actual territory gained has hit historical highs. Critical logistics corridors running through Poland and Romania continue to supply Ukraine with the vital hardware required to hold the line. But frontline armor compositions tell an even bigger story. Modern T-90 tanks are increasingly being replaced by reactivated legacy T-62 models. Precision artillery systems like HIMARS continuously force logistics hubs to pull back dozens of kilometers from the active combat zone. In a classic war of attrition, well-prepared defensive positions naturally hold a massive structural advantage over frontal assaults. Out in the Black Sea, asymmetric sea drone operations successfully forced the Russian Navy to retreat from Sevastopol toward Novorossiysk. At the same time, Ukraine's domestic defense industry expanded at a record pace, producing its own howitzers, armored vehicles, and drones. However, strict Western restrictions on targeting military assets inside Russian territory long created a safe sanctuary for enemy bombers. Economically, throwing a $2 million air defense missile at a $50,000 drone is simply an unsustainable equation. Fierce fighting around key sectors like Pokrovsk and Chasiv Yar highlights just how grueling this static attrition battle has become. While international sanctions squeezed Russia's formal economy, complex shadow trade networks through Central Asia helped bypass initial shocks. Which brings us to the core question of this analysis. How exactly can Ukraine transform this strategic deadlock into a clear path to victory? The answer lies in a strategy of asymmetric paralysis. starting with targeted strikes against Russia's economic engine, its oil refining network. Long-range Ukrainian strike drones, like the Lyuty, began bypassing border radars to hit high-value industrial targets deep behind the lines. Major oil facilities in Ryazan, Nizhny Novgorod, and Krasnodar suddenly found their primary distillation columns engulfed in flames. In just a few months of systematic strikes, Russia lost a significant percentage of its primary oil refining capacity. Disrupted pipelines and damaged export terminals meant that crude oil could no longer be easily converted into usable military fuel. Domestically, regional fuel shortages quickly triggered a sharp spike in wholesale gasoline prices across the Russian Federation. To prevent widespread consumer panic, the Russian government was forced to impose an outright ban on fuel exports. This created an immediate logistical headache for military planners trying to prioritize civilian fuel needs versus frontline supply lines. Supply trains carrying vital diesel to armored divisions faced mounting delays as regional storage hubs were systematically targeted. By expanding drone production, Ukraine stretched its operational strike radius out to 1,500 kilometers, putting dozens of industrial hubs at risk. Mobile launch teams operating near the borders exploited gaps in enemy air defenses, taking advantage of focused frontline radar positions. The asymmetric economic math is brutal. A $50,000 drone can inflict tens of millions of dollars in structural damage to a cracking tower. Military airfields housing tactical bombers were brought under continuous pressure, disrupting launch schedules for guided glide bombs. Satellite imagery confirmed the destruction of key ammunition staging areas and parked Su-34 aircraft at rear air bases. Railway bridges and electrical substations powering military transport corridors became high-priority targets in the deep strike campaign. As oil revenues began to decline, national state budget reserves felt the long-term strain of financing a prolonged conflict. Even major commercial oil export harbors like Novorossiysk faced growing operational risks from sea drone swarms and aerial strikes. Facing widespread industrial damage, military commanders made a critical choice: redeploying air defense systems from the front to protect inland factories. This created vital gaps in frontline air defense, allowing Ukrainian tactical drones to operate with significantly higher success rates. What we are watching is a classic economic cascade failure, where a hit on energy ripples through manufacturing, transport, and finance. Special attention turned to defense components, like gunpowder plants, optical facilities, and microelectronics factories across Western Russia. Disrupted component deliveries slowed down the production and repair of armored vehicles at major tank manufacturing plants. Under strict international sanctions, sourcing specialized replacement equipment for damaged industrial towers became an expensive nightmare. Month after month, the cumulative footprint of deep strikes expanded across European Russia, forcing constant operational adjustments. This relentless campaign created two massive operational bottlenecks: a growing fuel deficit and widespread logistical paralysis. But long-range drones were only the first phase. The real game changer emerged with the deployment of Ukraine's domestic ballistic program, the Crimea. Boasting a range of up to 700 kilometers, a heavy ballistic missile offers capabilities no light drone could ever match. traveling at hypersonic terminal speeds. Ballistic missiles penetrate conventional air defense bubbles in a matter of minutes, while cruise drones carry light warheads and travel slowly. A ballistic strike delivers hundreds of kilograms of high explosives at immense velocity. This brought strategic command centers and industrial heartlands in central Russia within rapid, uninterceptable strike range. Produced in fortified underground facilities, these domestic systems gave Ukraine total freedom from foreign weapon usage restrictions. Heavily fortified command bunkers, communications centers, and logistics nodes previously deemed safe were suddenly exposed to direct hits. Air defense systems like the S-300 and S-400 found their tracking radars overwhelmed when forced to react to high-angle ballistic trajectories. Production lines manufacturing air defense missiles in places like Tula and Izhevsk became primary targets themselves. The integration of hybrid jet drones like Palyanitsia alongside heavy ballistic missiles created a lethal, multi-layered strike doctrine. Coordinated attacks used cheap decoy drones to deplete enemy interceptors right before heavy ballistic missiles arrived on target. Deep underground storage bunkers and hardened concrete shelters were systematically neutralized across Western military districts. Logistics bottlenecks along major transport arteries like the M4 highway were repeatedly hit, severing main military supply veins. As domestic missile production scaled up month by month, the operational tempo of deep strikes reached unprecedented levels. For Russian military planners, the comfortable sanctuary zone behind the border effectively ceased to exist. Integrated Western satellite intelligence provided real-time targeting coordinates, maximizing the impact of every launched missile. Early warning radar stations like the Voronezh network suffered severe damage, degrading broader strategic surveillance coverage. The difference in destructive impact is massive. Moving from a 20-kilogram drone payload to a 500-kilogram ballistic warhead changes everything. Frequent air raid sirens across key industrial cities disrupted factory shifts, creating widespread economic and administrative strain. Russian aviation units were forced to pull back advanced fighter jets even further east, significantly reducing their effective combat range over the front. Mobile launch platforms for Ukrainian missiles remained elusive, operating under tight air defense umbrellas and constant movement protocols. Most importantly, Ukraine gained complete operational independence, striking critical targets whenever tactical opportunities arose. Military staging grounds opposite Ukraine were kept under constant observation and fire control, preventing large troop concentrations. This marked a fundamental strategic evolution, moving from localized tactical defense to a countrywide operational deep strike campaign. Ukraine's domestic ballistic capability permanently shifted the strategic balance of power. As winter set in, Ukraine deployed a decentralized energy network, leveraging localized solar, gas, and microgrid solutions to protect cities. Multi-layered air defense systems, including Patriot, NASAMS, and IRIS-T, created a formidable shield over critical population centers. In response to grid strikes, targeted long-range counterattacks hit key electrical substations, powering military infrastructure across the border. Sub-zero temperatures severely impacted troop welfare, causing widespread mechanical breakdowns and freezing unmaintained equipment. Down south, attention focused on the Crimean Peninsula, an area poised to become a strategic vulnerability. Repeated precision strikes targeted the structural integrity of the Kerch Strait Bridge, severing its vital rail logistics spans. Without the bridge, heavy military transport trains could no longer deliver fuel and ammunition directly into the peninsula. The alternative overland rail line through Melitopol and Mariupol was brought under continuous fire control by HIMARS and ATACMS. Out at sea, swarms of Magura 5 naval drones effectively blockaded naval bases in Sevastopol, trapping the remaining fleet. Systematic cluster strikes degraded Crimean air defense radars, leaving military installations vulnerable to follow-up missile attacks. Remarkably, Ukraine achieved a strategic siege of Crimea without launching a single amphibious assault or risking infantry landings. Civilian supply lines choked as military cargo ships struggled to navigate drone-infested waters under constant threat. Inside the Crimean garrison, critical shortages of fuel, fresh water, and artillery ammunition quickly began to compound. While Ukraine's fortified grid managed through the winter months, municipal heating and power failures rippled across several Russian regions. Ukraine's independent Black Sea grain corridor continued operating smoothly, providing vital export revenue to sustain the war economy. Remnants of the Russian Black Sea Fleet were forced to stay anchored in Novorossiysk, effectively neutralized as a major combat factor. The destruction of high-end S-400 radar batteries opened up wide corridors for long-range air-launched cruise missiles. Logistically, short European supply routes into Ukraine proved far more efficient than overextended Russian railways stretching thousands of kilometers. Crimean airfields, ammunition dumps, and staging grounds were rendered completely unusable for offensive operations. The financial cost of attempting to supply and maintain an isolated Crimean garrison skyrocketed to unsustainable levels. Winter blizzards compounded logistical delays, leaving hundreds of military transport trucks stranded along icy roads. Deep strike drones targeted energy infrastructure around major administrative centers, keeping emergency repair crews constantly deployed. Russia's planned winter offensives ground to a halt as frontline armor ran out of fuel and maintenance support. Crimea had transformed from a formidable offensive fortress into an isolated defensive trap. Winter resilience and smart logistical warfare had firmly placed time on Ukraine's side. Economically, Russia's National Wealth Fund saw its liquid assets decline toward critical minimum thresholds. Sharp interest rate hikes above 20%, soaring inflation, and severe labor shortages pointed to an overheating domestic economy. Factory floors faced acute labor deficits as hundreds of thousands of working-age men were drawn into military service. High-resolution satellite imagery revealed that open-air military storage yards for APCs and artillery were nearing total depletion. While thousands of legacy armored vehicles were restored early in the war, reactivable reserves dwindled significantly by 2026. Heavy artillery barrels reached their operational wear limits, resulting in severe accuracy degradation and dangerous barrel bursts. International diplomatic pressure from major trading partners grew as economic disruptions began impacting global supply chains. Spending over 8% of national GDP on defense created deep structural imbalances that the civilian economy could no longer absorb. Regional budgets face steep funding cuts in healthcare, education, and infrastructure maintenance to keep up war allocations. Skyrocketing sign-on bonuses failed to attract sufficient numbers of new recruits, signaling growing societal exhaustion. On the front lines, assault units were increasingly forced to rely on unarmored golf carts and motorcycles for transport. In stark contrast, Ukraine accelerated the deployment of automated turret systems, ground robots, and AI-driven drone swarms. Tighter financial sanctions cracked down on shadow fleet operations, blocking key international banking channels. Ukraine's domestic defense industry secured billions in direct investments, expanding localized production lines every quarter. Shell deliveries from external allies suffered from notorious quality control defects and high DUD rates on the battlefield. By early 2026, Russia's overall offensive momentum reached a state of complete material exhaustion across all sectors. This brought the conflict to a classic historical tipping point, where the political cost of continuing the war far exceeded any potential gain. Combined economic hits, energy shortages, and armor deficits caused military supply lines to fracture at the operational level. Budgetary shortfalls and rising inflation stoked growing discontent across distant Russian provinces. Meanwhile, European defense manufacturing scaled up significantly, guaranteeing a steady long-term flow of munitions to Ukraine. Holding fortified positions with high-tech automated systems allowed Ukrainian forces to minimize losses while maximizing enemy attrition. Military commanders were trapped in an impossible dilemma: protect the active front line or redeploy assets to guard internal infrastructure. Globally, Russia's once lucrative defense export market collapsed as foreign buyers canceled long-term hardware contracts. The industrial and economic war effort had run directly into a hard material ceiling. The military culmination point had officially arrived, recognizing the shift in material reality. High-level diplomatic discussions began shaping the framework for a sustainable peace. A total ceasefire was established along the active front line, halting all offensive operations and aerial strikes. Under intense diplomatic and economic pressure, an agreement was reached for the complete withdrawal of Russian forces from Crimea. The Crimean Peninsula officially returned to Ukrainian administrative control, secured by international peacekeeping observers. Demilitarized security buffer zones were established along the northeastern border to prevent future cross-border incursions. Ukraine secured robust, binding international security guarantees and long-term bilateral defense pacts with major Western allies. Fast-track integration protocols accelerated Ukraine's full accession into the European Union. Deep structural integration embedded Ukrainian armed forces into NATO military coordination and defense frameworks. Hundreds of billions in frozen Russian central bank assets were legally redirected into a dedicated global reconstruction fund, a comprehensive $500 billion modernization plan launched to rebuild Ukrainian energy, transport, and city infrastructure. Ukraine emerged as Eastern Europe's leading defense technology hub, manufacturing advanced autonomous systems for international partners. Millions of displaced citizens returned home, driving a powerful economic revival and demographic boom. Freedom of navigation was permanently restored across the Black Sea, establishing secure maritime trade corridors. The geopolitical boundary of European democracy moved firmly to the east, anchored by a strong, resilient Ukrainian nation. Inside Russia, the end of the conflict prompted deep domestic political restructuring and a renewed focus on internal economic recovery. Comparing the initial 2022 invasion goals to the 2026 reality reveals a complete strategic failure of brute force aggression. This conflict demonstrated a fundamental truth of modern warfare. Technological adaptation and economic endurance will always overcome mass numbers. Modern Eastern Europe emerged with secure, sovereign, and internationally recognized borders. A long-term deterrence model was established, ensuring peace and stability across the continent for generations to come. New economic trade corridors linked the Black Sea directly to Central European markets, driving regional prosperity. When you analyze every factor, military, economic, and logistical, the final outcome becomes clear. Ukraine stood strong, proud, and completely sovereign. Geography, innovation, and strategic resilience defined the ultimate outcome. A new international security architecture was forged in the fires of conflict. Maps and numbers proved it. Ukraine's victory was economically and strategically inevitable.